In this film, we're going to be looking at soldering again, and we're going to be looking at a technique called sweat soldering. My name's Andrew Berry, and welcome to At the Benches YouTube channel. This particular sort of demonstration that I'm going to be showing you does not necessarily call for sweat soldering. I'm going to take you through two different scenarios, a simple idea in my head. We're going to make up a pair of earrings. We're going to make one earring using one type of soldering technique, and we're going to make up the other earring using the other type of soldering technique. And I'm going to show you, hopefully, which one is best and the reason why. I love soldering. Soldering is absolutely fantastic technique to get to grips with. You've got to get to know the properties of the solder, how it flows. You have to get the materials right, the conditions and everything for soldering. Once you've got that, it is an absolute joy to solder. And I still get a kick of seeing a fantastic solder joint sort of work and the solder flows. It's absolutely fantastic. But once you've got that technique all mastered, there's still lots to learn. And I always try and think about trying to reduce the amount of cleanup, sorry I spat them, the amount of cleanup once you have soldered, and in what way can we stop the flow of solder, the spread of solder, to reduce the amount of cleanup. Because if you're making jewelry for a living or making it purely for a hobby and you sell your pieces, the longer you spend on a piece, the more you have to charge. So finding techniques and ways of soldering that will reduce time cleaning up a piece will reduce the cost of the item and make you more competitive. So we're going to be making up, as I said, a pair of earrings. I've stamped out already two little discs of silver. These are two little discs here. And what we're going to do, we're going to solder on the ear wire, a little piece of wire that I've got here, 0.8 millimeters in diameter. These discs, what are these, about 12 millimeters in diameter, and the metal is around about 1/3 of a millimeter thick, although that really does not matter. I'm just going to show you a particular technique. Now, you may have seen a technique that I did when I soldered the oval bezel to a base plate, and I'll put it up by here if you want to go and check it at the end of the film. Just to reduce the flow of solder, and that's what we're going to do. There's lots of information out there, there's lots of books, and in fact I buy all the different types of jewelry making books because I love to see how people approach different techniques, and can I learn something, because I learn every day. There's always something new to learn. And I've seen this particular technique and I really don't like it. There's a better way to do this particular type of project, soldering a wire onto the face of a piece of metal. I never like, I'm having a problem getting this off actually, there's a bit of paper. I never like to see solder flow unnecessarily. Solder will always flow across a surface if it's nice and clean. But solder will always stay between two surfaces. It won't flow further away from those two surfaces that are joined. And that's what I'm thinking. That's what we're going to be doing in this film. Come on. I should have prepared this beforehand, shouldn't I? Okay, so what we're going to be doing, we're going to be getting our pieces of silver and we're going to be soldering on a wire simply across the back, like that. Now this is going to be on the back of the piece, so the front is going to have the nice shiny disc, the back is going to have the wire, and you may think, well, it doesn't matter if it's on the back, it doesn't matter if it's not as nicely polished or the surface isn't as clean and smooth as the front. Well, actually, yes, it does matter, because you can take steps to make sure that your solder joint is absolutely gorgeous, and I love a fantastic solder joint. So what we're going to do very quickly now, we're just going to get a piece of emery paper, and we're just going to clean up the back of the earring. Even though we've got these bits of silver be just stamped out. We just taken the little paper off it, but to be honest, it's still not clean enough. Let's just put those little bits of, just clean the back with a bit of emery paper. Let's get a bit of borax. I could have put those discs, warmed them up and dunked them in the acid to get them nice and clean. I've just put a bit of emery paper over the back. We're just going to put some borax in that area, and because the area of those discs that we have just used the emery paper on, you can see how lovely, and now that flux just absolutely flows gorgeously across. Piece of silver wire. I'm just roughly going to cut these into certain length. I'm making this up as I'm going along, can you tell? And these are around about 75 millimeters in length. We're going to clean the ends of these as well. Don't worry if you can't, so I'm going to bring the camera in close up now in a moment. We're going to get the wires, and we're going to get the emery paper on the wires to make sure that those ends are nice and tidy and clean, free from oxides, free from any grease or anything like that. And again, we're going to get a little bit of borax onto the ends of those wires. Okay. So how would you solder these wires onto these discs? Okay, so this is the question that I'm asking. So we've got our discs, we're going to solder the wires onto these discs. Just like that, right through the center. Again, I love flux, I love borax. You can never have too much. Let's just put a little bit more on here. Make sure we're going to get a gorgeous solder joint, because if flux doesn't flow, the solder won't. The flux keeps the area nice and clean. It keeps the area clear of oxides and so forth, and just enables that solder to flow. So we're going to use some solder. It's getting quite small, there's a little bit of solder now. And we're going to cut off a few little pallions for this particular job. Okay, so we're going to cut off equal size pallions. Okay, so just cut off 4 little pallions here, and we're just going to move one earring away. And I've been basically reading the book this morning on soldering, and this is what they suggest. We put the solder like this right next to the wire, like that. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you what's wrong, what's right, or anything like that. So that's what they suggest we do. So let's just warm this up, and we're going to see what happens. So we've got to be careful that we don't melt the wire. So we're just going to bring the flame down over the top of the disc, nice and carefully. There's my solder. Make sure that the wire now is in contact with that disc. Here's my solder. Let's push my solder back towards the wire. Looking nice. Let's warm the disc up. And when the disc is the correct temperature, the solder will melt. Gradually do this. Any second now. Lovely. All right, we got a lovely solder joint. That's looking really good. Let's just pop that into the acid. Let's leave that there. And okay, what we're going to do on this one, what we're going to do on this one is something slightly different. So I'm not going to lay my wire on top this time. I'm going to basically solder the wire on its own. I'm just going to melt my little bits of solder here onto my wire first of all. Obviously I don't want the solder too high up the wire. Let's melt the solder onto the wire. Carefully so we don't melt the wire. Soldered there, and this little chap here. Lovely. Okay, so our solder is now on our wire. Let's just pop that into the acid. Lovely. All right, so the solder hasn't quite flowed all the way along the wire. Fine, not concerned. Let's just bring the disc into place. Let's make sure we get some borax, some flux onto the end of that wire, like that there. Put my bit of wire on top, and now let's solder that wire onto the disc. Yes, it is taking a little bit longer, another little soldering step. Just push that down, make sure that wire now is in contact with the disc. Warm the disc up. I'm not really putting the torch onto the wire, it's going onto the disc. The heat is being transferred also onto the wire. Also the edge of the flame is catching the wire, so that the wire is heating up as well. And as soon as the temperature is right, that solder is going to melt along the disc, just like that. So the solder has flowed all the way up to the end here, and all the way down here as well. Lush. Okay, let's pop that into the acid as well, and give me a few minutes, and we'll compare how clean these joints are. Okay, they've been in the acid for about 10 minutes. Let's just bring them out. They look nice, don't they? Both of them look fine. Both of them look really, really good. Let's just dry these off for you to have a look. So this was the first one we did, and this one is the second one we did. Now, I can just see in the camera, you may be able to see exactly what I mean and the reason why I'm doing this particular type of film. Okay, this is the first disc. This is where we place the pallions of solder onto the surface. This is the second disc. This is where we put the solder onto the wire. Now, as I was saying 10 minutes ago at the start of the film, solder likes to flow along a surface. But if that solder is already between two surfaces, it will stay between two surfaces and it won't flow anywhere else. This one here, can you see? Let me just see if I can just warm this up for you to have a look. And I know I've used a bit of emery paper on this. Now, you should be able to see what I'm talking about. That solder on this first piece has flowed onto the bit of silver here to start off with. Then it has thought, oh my gosh, there's a lovely surface that I need to flow under. Oh, I love that surface, and it flowed all the way along the wire. But it initially flowed here. This is like a shadow. This is remnants. This is solder in this area. This one is where we put the solder on the wire, and the solder decided to flow exactly where it wanted to flow, between the wire and the plate. It did not spread over the plate itself because it didn't need to. It was attracted between the two surfaces where they are touching. That's where the solder will flow. So my argument is this disc here is going to take a lot longer to clean up because we've got this area of solder here. And when these earrings are worn, and when these earrings start to slightly discolor due to the sulfur that is in the air, and it starts just to tarnish the silver, you'll see this massive area of solder by here. So really what you should do is try and get this little bit of solder off, as you should do. But it's going to take a lot longer to try and remove this area of solder here and then to refinish the whole area than what it would have been is if you'd done it this way and just taken another 30 seconds to do the extra technique of sweat soldering, putting the solder on the wire and then putting it then on top of the disc. The solder has not flowed in this area at all around here. Nowhere has that solder flowed onto the plate. This one, the solder, excuse me, has flowed on the plate. We have to remove that solder. So I'm not saying that the first technique is wrong. There's nothing wrong about it. You get a gorgeous solder joint, providing you obviously have the conditions right and you have close fitting joints. There's nothing wrong, but the way that I showed you in the second way is a better way of soldering. It's a neater way of soldering. And if we had put these into some acid to clean them instead of using the emery paper, all I'd have to do with this one here, the second one I did, is get a bristle brush or a white nylon brush just to polish the back. That's it. That would be finished. This one here, the first one, you can just see again the solder on there. What we'd have to do with this one is get the buff stick and then buff the plate just to try and remove all that solder. Once you've buffed the plate with your buff stick, then you have to go through with your white nylon brush or your bristle brush and so forth. And it's going to take you longer. You're not going to get as good a finish as this one here, the second one that we did. So, sweat solder, this is just purely a typical application, like soldering an ear wire. If you were soldering, for instance, a wire shape onto a simple back plate, don't put the pallions of solder on the sheet. It's going to take a long time to get that bit of shadow of solder off. Always try and add the solder onto the wire. Then when that wire gets soldered onto the plate, the solder won't flow. It will stay between the wire and the plate. It won't flow anywhere else. It's going to be far easier for you to clean that surface up and get more of a professional finish doing it that second way than the first way. Hope that makes a lot of sense. I love soldering. I'm so passionate about it and I love it when the solder joints flow. Both did exactly that, but the second method would be far, far quicker, more professional cleanup than the first. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Smash that little bell icon, the little bell button, the little bell to be notified when films go live on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, please give this film a ding, a thumbs up if you like it. Don't forget, please share it with your friends as well. A couple of bloopers. Everyone seems to love the bloopers these days. A few bloopers at the end of it, so stick around for that. My name's Andrew Berry for At The Benches YouTube channel. Take care. I will see you next time. Ta-da. Should really make a script. I've had my microphone properly. There we go. Right. In this film, we're going to be looking at soldering again and a technique called sweat soldering. Now, in this technique, we don't have, that's going to be far too long an introduction as if I go through all that. In this film, we're going, someone run in the water. Someone run in the water.